The frozen world was silent, except for the sound of the storm. Snowflakes hit the ground like knives, sharp and endless. The wind screamed across the white desert, making the air heavy and cold. It was not a place for humans. It was not a place for life at all. But David was there. His boots sank into the deep snow with every step. His breath came out in heavy clouds, fogging his visor. He held his arm in front of his face, blocking the icy wind, trying to see just a little farther. The storm was so strong that even the mountains in the distance had disappeared. Only white everywhere. David checked the scanner on his wrist. The signal was weak, the screen shaking from the cold. He muttered under his breath, "No readings. Nothing out here. Just snow." Still, he kept walking. He had come too far to turn back. The storm grew worse. The ground cracked under his feet, the ice groaning like an old ship. Somewhere deep below, frozen rivers moved slowly, shifting like monsters under the ground. David felt the danger. He knew one wrong step could mean falling into the endless dark beneath the ice. But he had no choice. Suddenly, a sound cut through the storm. At first, David thought it was the wind, a strange cry, thin and broken, lost in the snow. He froze. His heart started to pound. There it was again, a faint voice, weak, desperate. He turned his head, scanning the white emptiness. "Hello?" he shouted, his voice nearly stolen by the wind. No answer. But then, the sound returned, softer now. It was not the storm, it was not the wind, it was a cry for help. David pushed forward. His boots slipped on the ice. Snow filled his gloves, but he didn't stop. The sound grew louder with each step, though it was still faint, almost broken. It came from under the ground. He fell to his knees and pressed his ear against the snow. His heart stopped. Yes, voices, 2 of them, calling, begging. His hands began to dig. The snow was heavy, wet, and freezing, but he clawed through it with everything he had. His fingers burned, his arms ached, but he dug deeper. The cries grew clearer, sharper. "Help us," a soft voice whispered from beneath the snow. David's breath caught. Not human. The voice was not human. Still, he kept digging. At last, his hand touched something warm. He pulled harder, moving the snow aside until he saw it, a hand, thin, glowing faintly with blue light. The skin was smooth, almost shining, unlike anything human. The fingers trembled weakly, reaching toward him, then falling back into the snow. David's eyes widened. My God! He didn't stop. He dug faster, his body shaking from both fear and determination. Soon, he uncovered more. A face, half buried, with pale blue skin and bright silver eyes half closed in pain. An alien, but not alone. Beside her, another face, nearly the same, blue skin, glowing eyes, and soft white hair frozen with ice. 2 of them, 2 sisters, buried alive under the snow. Their lips moved, whispering words he could not understand, but their eyes begged him for help. David grabbed the first sister by the arm and pulled her free. She was so light, as if the storm had already taken most of her strength. He laid her down on the snow and turned back to the second. His muscles screamed with exhaustion, but he pulled until she too was free. Both sisters lay before him, shivering, their breaths shallow, their bodies weak. David quickly removed his thermal blanket from his pack and wrapped it around them. "Stay with me," he said, though he wasn't sure if they could understand his words. The storm howled louder, covering them in ice again. Time was running out. One of the sisters reached out, her glowing hand gripping David's arm weakly. Her voice was almost broken, but he heard it. "You saved us," she whispered. David stared at them. In all his life, he had never seen anything like this. 2 alien women, desperate and fragile, looking at him with a mix of fear and hope. He tightened the blanket around them and lifted his head to the storm. He had no idea who they were. He had no idea why they were here, or why the universe had brought him to this place at this exact moment. But one thing was clear. If he left them, they would die. And somehow, deep inside, he knew saving them would change his life forever. The storm screamed louder, snow covering them all, but David's grip did not loosen. He would not let them go. Not now, not ever. The storm was still raging. Snow whipped across the frozen ground and the air burned with cold. David's body ached, but he forced himself to move. He could not let the 2 alien sisters die here. He bent down and lifted the first one into his arms. Her skin was icy cold, her breath so weak it was almost gone. The other sister clutched his coat, her glowing eyes half open, silently begging him not to leave her behind. David gritted his teeth. Both of you. I'm taking both of you." With one arm, he carried the first sister. With his free hand, he pulled the second along, her body light as snow but trembling with weakness. Step by step, he pushed through the storm. Far ahead, a dark shape appeared, a ridge of rocks, sharp and jagged, half buried in white. David remembered passing it earlier. Somewhere behind that ridge was his survival pod, a shelter with heat and supplies. The journey felt endless. Each step was heavy, his boots sinking deep into the snow. His muscles burned, his lungs stung with icy air. Still, he kept going. Behind him, the storm roared like a living beast, trying to swallow them all. One of the sisters whispered something in a weak voice. David could not understand the words, but he heard the fear in them. He looked down and saw her eyes closing. "No, no," David muttered, shaking her gently. "Stay awake. Don't you dare quit on me." At last, he reached the ridge. The sharp rocks cut into his gloves, but he climbed, dragging the sisters with him. When he finally slid down the other side, his heart jumped. There it was, his pod. A small metal shelter half buried in snow, glowing faintly with emergency lights. He rushed forward, kicking snow away from the hatch. With a hiss, the door opened, warm air spilling out like a miracle. David pulled the sisters inside and slammed the door shut. The sound of the storm became muffled, distant, almost like a nightmare fading away. Inside, the pod was small but safe. A heater buzzed softly in the corner, spreading warmth. Supplies were stacked against the wall, food packs, water filters, and blankets. David laid the sisters down on the padded floor and quickly wrapped them in thermal blankets. Their bodies shook violently, as if the warmth itself was too much after the freezing cold. He knelt beside them, checking their breathing. Weak, but steady. Alive. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with something else, a strange feeling. Wonder. Here they were, two alien women, unlike anything he had ever seen. Their skin glowed faintly blue, almost shining under the dim light of the pod. Their white hair spread across the blanket like silver threads. Their eyes, though heavy with exhaustion, still carried a glow, as if stars lived inside them. They were beautiful. But more than that, they were alive because of him. One of them stirred. Slowly, she opened her eyes, the silver glow dim but clear. She looked at David, her lips trembling as she spoke. "You saved us." Her voice was soft, musical, almost like a song. David froze, shocked that he could understand her words. Somehow her voice carried meaning to his ears. The other sister opened her eyes too, weaker but still alive. She whispered, "Who are you?" David swallowed hard. "My name is David. I'm just a human." The sisters exchanged a weak glance, then looked back at him. Their hands trembled as they reached toward him, touching his arm as if to confirm he was real. "You came through the storm," one whispered. "You heard us," the other added, her voice breaking. David nodded slowly. "Yes, I heard you. I couldn't leave you there." Silence filled the pod, broken only by the hum of the heater. The sisters lay close together under the blankets, still shivering but slowly warming. Their eyes stayed on David, not with fear, but with something else, trust. For the first time since landing on this frozen world, David felt a strange connection. He had been alone for so long, surviving day after day with nothing but the cold. Now, in this tiny shelter, he was no longer alone. Hours passed. The storm outside raged on, but inside, life slowly returned to the sisters. Their breathing grew stronger, their bodies warmer. David gave them water from a flask, lifting it gently to their lips. They drank carefully, their glowing eyes never leaving his face. "Why were you out there?" David finally asked, breaking the silence. The sisters looked at each other, a shadow crossing their faces. Then the first one spoke. "We were left to die." David frowned. "Left to die? By who?" Their voices trembled. "Our own people." David sat back, shocked. He didn't understand. Why would anyone abandon them in such a cruel way? He wanted to ask more, but he saw the pain in their eyes. Now was not the time. Instead, he said quietly, "You're safe now. I'll protect you." The sisters blinked at his words. One of them whispered something in her own language, then both nodded slowly, their faces softening. And then, something strange happened. They smiled. Faint, weak, but real smiles. David didn't know it yet, but that smile carried meaning far beyond his imagination. To them, he was no longer just a stranger. He was their savior. And in their hearts, that meant only one thing. He was theirs. The storm outside still howled like a monster. Snow crashed, a against the walls of the pod, but inside, it was quiet, almost peaceful. David sat against the cold metal wall, watching the two sisters. They were wrapped tightly in blankets, their glowing eyes slowly becoming brighter as warmth returned to their bodies. For hours, they had been too weak to speak, but now he saw them whispering to each other in a strange language, their voices soft and smooth like flowing water. David tried not to stare, but he couldn't help it. Everything about them was different, yet somehow familiar. The curve of their faces, the way they held each other, the way their eyes studied him when they thought he wasn't looking. Finally, one of them turned toward him. It was the sister he had pulled out first, the stronger of the two. Her silver eyes glowed softly in the dim light. "My name, Lyra," she said slowly, as if tasting the human words. David blinked. "Lyra?" She nodded. Then she pointed to the other, who was still resting. "Nira, my sister." David repeated the names quietly. Lyra, Nira. Both sisters smiled faintly. The sound of their names in his voice seemed to please them. Time passed, and they grew stronger. David gave them food packs, dry, tasteless human rations. They sniffed them with suspicion, but hunger won, and they ate slowly. Lyra looked at him after finishing. "You alone here?" David gave a small laugh, though it wasn't happy. "Yes, alone. My mission failed. My crew, gone. I survived. That's all." The sisters shared a glance. Their eyes softened, as if they understood the weight of his words. For the first time in months, David felt something he hadn't felt before. He wasn't just talking to strangers. He wasn't just surviving another day. He was connecting. Nira finally spoke, her voice softer than Lyra's, almost like a whisper of wind. "Why? Why help us? We, not your kind." David looked at her, surprised by the question. He thought for a moment, then answered simply, "Because you needed me, because I couldn't walk away." Lyra leaned closer, her eyes shining. "Brighter now. Our people would have walked away. They left us." Her voice cracked at the last words. Nira reached for her hand, holding it tightly. David frowned. "Why? Why would they leave you in the storm?" The sisters were silent for a long time. Finally, Lyra said in a low voice, "We are unwanted." Nira added, "Our family betrayed us." Their words carried pain, deep and sharp. David didn't push for details. He only nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then they're fools. They don't deserve you." The sisters stared at him, as if his words were something they had never heard before. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the sound of the heater. David sat near them, repairing a torn glove with a sewing kit, but he felt their eyes on him, watching every movement. Finally, Nira spoke again. "David." He looked up. She rarely spoke his name, and when she did, it carried weight. "You are different." David raised a brow. "Different how?" Lyra answered this time. "Our people. They are strong, proud, cold. But you..." She leaned forward slightly. "You fight the storm. For strangers." David shrugged. "Maybe that's just human nature." The sisters tilted their heads, studying him. "Human nature," Lyra repeated softly, as if testing the words. Nira's glowing eyes softened. "We like this nature." The connection grew stronger. They asked him about Earth, and he told them stories of green forests, warm oceans, and skies full of birds. He spoke of cities shining with lights, of music and laughter, of people living close together. The sisters listened with wide eyes, their faces glowing with wonder. For them, it was like hearing a tale from a dream. In return, they shared pieces of their own world. They spoke of crystal cities that floated above seas of fire. They spoke of towers that touched the sky, powered by the energy of stars. They spoke of a royal court where beauty and cruelty walked hand in hand. David realized then, they were not just anyone. They were from power, from status, from a life far above ordinary. And yet here they were, abandoned in the snow. As night deepened, the storm outside raged harder, but inside the pod, a quiet warmth filled the air. The sisters moved closer to him, their eyes glowing gently in the dim light. Lyra spoke softly. "You are not like our people. You protect us, care for us. Why?" David looked at them both, their fragile forms wrapped in blankets. He thought for a moment, then said, "Because everyone deserves to be saved, no matter who they are." The sisters' eyes glistened. For a moment, it looked as if they might cry, but instead they smiled, soft and full of something unspoken. Nira whispered, almost too quiet to hear, "Then, we will stay with you. Always." Lyra nodded firmly. "Yes, we stay." David's heart skipped. Their words carried a weight far deeper than he understood. That night, as the storm roared, David felt something new. A bond had formed, strong, unshakable. He did not know what it meant yet. He did not know where it would lead. But he knew this: he was no longer alone, and neither were they. The storm weakened after 2 days. The howling wind faded into whispers, and the endless white world outside the pod grew calm again. David looked through the frost-covered window. The snow had settled, smooth and still, like the world was holding its breath. But peace never lasts. David had lived long enough to know that silence after a storm was dangerous. Inside the pod, Lyra and Nira were stronger now. Their skin glowed brighter, and their voices no longer trembled. They could stand, move, and even smile. They spent most of their time close to David, watching him work on his gear, listening to his stories. For a moment, he almost forgot this world wanted him dead. For a moment, it felt safe. Then the signal came. The scanner on David's wrist beeped. He frowned and tapped it. A red light pulsed on the screen. Movement, not far from the ridge. Strange, he muttered. Could be ice shifting. Or not. Lyra noticed his sharp tone. What is it? David showed them the screen. Something's out there, alive. The sisters exchanged a glance, their glow dimming. Their faces grew pale, and Nira whispered a single word that chilled the pod. Hunters. David's eyes narrowed. Hunters? What kind of hunters? Lyra's voice was bitter. The ones who left us in the storm. They come now. To finish us. David's jaw tightened. So they know you survived. Nira nodded slowly. They will not stop. They cannot allow us to live. David stood and grabbed his rifle from the corner. He checked the power cell, the scope, the barrel. He had little ammo left, but enough to fight. His soldier instincts returned in a rush. He looked at the sisters. If they want you, they'll have to go through me. For the first time since meeting him, Lyra smiled fiercely. Then they will regret coming. Hours passed. The storm clouds parted, revealing a pale green sky. David climbed the ridge alone, scanning the horizon with his scope. And there they were, dark shapes moving across the snow. 4 of them, tall, armored, their weapons glowing faintly in the cold light. They moved in perfect formation, like predators stalking prey. Hunters. David felt his heart hammering. He didn't know their weapons, their tactics, or their limits, but he knew killers when he saw them. These weren't soldiers fighting for honor. These were executioners. He returned to the pod quickly. 4 of them, armed, closing in. The sisters stiffened. Nira clutched David's arm, her eyes wide. They will kill you too if you protect us. You should run. David shook his head firmly. Not happening. I don't run. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes blazing with strange light. Then we fight together. David paused. He had seen their G. Low before, faint and weak in the storm. But now, it pulsed stronger, like hidden power, waiting to be released. What exactly can you do? He asked carefully. Lyra raised her hand. A soft light shimmered in her palm, forming sparks of energy that danced like fireflies. The light bent the air itself, humming with raw force. David stared. That'll do. The hunters came at dusk. Their black armor shimmered against the snow, their steps heavy but silent. They spread out around the ridge, scanning with glowing visors. Inside the pod, David crouched near the door, rifle in hand. His breath was steady, eyes locked on the entrance. Lyra and Nira sat close, their hands glowing faintly with alien power. Their faces were calm now, no longer afraid. David whispered, "When they come, stay low. Let me draw them in first." Lyra's silver eyes burned. "No, human. We stand with you." For a moment, David felt something strange, a rush of pride, of connection. He gave a small nod. "Then let's make them regret." The first shot came fast. A beam of energy ripped through the pod's wall, burning a hole into the metal. David ducked, pulling the sisters down with him. The hunters shouted something in their harsh alien tongue. Footsteps crunched closer. David rolled to the side, raised his rifle, and fired through the hole. One hunter staggered back, armor smoking. "Come on then," David growled. The pod shook as the hunter slammed against the hatch. David fired again, but his rifle hissed, ammo almost gone. Then Lyra stepped forward. She pressed her glowing hand against the metal wall. The air itself cracked with light, and a blast of energy exploded outward. The hatch burst open, throwing two hunters back into the snow. David blinked. "Remind me not to make you angry." The fight spilled outside. Snow exploded with fire and light as weapons clashed. David fired his last rounds, taking down another hunter with a shot to the visor. Nira raised both hands, and a wave of shimmering energy knocked the last hunter to his knees. David ran forward, slamming the butt of his rifle against the alien's helmet until it cracked. Silence fell. The snow was stained with smoke and blood. The hunters lay still, their armor glowing faintly before fading to black. David stood there, chest heaving, his rifle cracked and empty. The sisters moved beside him, their glow dimming again, exhausted but alive. He turned to them. "So, that's what we're up against." Lyra nodded grimly. "Yes, they will send more. They will not stop." Nira's soft voice shook as she whispered, "They will keep coming, until we are gone." David clenched his fists. His muscles ached, his weapon was useless, but his resolve was stronger than ever. "Then let them come," he said, his voice hard. "I'll fight every last one if I have to." The sisters stared at him, their eyes glowing with something fierce, respect, trust, and something deeper. For the first time in their lives, they felt safe. And for the first time in his, David realized he had something worth protecting. The bodies of the four hunters lay broken in the snow. Smoke drifted up from their armor, glowing faintly before turning black. For a moment, the frozen world was silent again, but David knew it wasn't over. He stood with his broken rifle hanging in his hands, his breath heavy. Beside him, Lyra and Nira leaned on each other, their glow flickering like fading candles. They had spent too much energy in the fight. David scanned the horizon. "This was only the first wave," he muttered. "They'll send more." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Yes, more will come, stronger. They want us dead." Nira's voice trembled, though she tried to sound brave. "Then we fight again." The green sky darkened, and the ground began to shake. David felt the vibration in his boots. He looked up. His heart sank. In the distance, shadows moved across the snow. Not four this time, dozens. Figures Marcer, Chet in formation, their armor shining, weapons glowing. A small ship floated behind them, low to the ground, its engines roaring like thunder. "Great," David muttered. "Now they brought reinforcements." Lyra gripped his arm. "We cannot face them all." David's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice." They ran back to the ridge, taking cover behind jagged rocks. Snow blew across the battlefield, swirling in ghostly patterns. The hunters advanced slowly, confident, like wolves circling prey. David checked his rifle. Empty, useless. He tossed it aside and pulled out his last weapon, a plasma knife. The blade hummed with blue light. He looked at the sisters. "You still have power left?" Lyra nodded weakly. "Enough to fight, but not enough to win." David smirked grimly. "Then we'll just have to cheat." The first volley came fast. Beams of energy cut through the air, exploding against the rocks. Snow flew into the sky, blinding them. David ducked low, pulling Nira down with him. "Stay behind me," he shouted. But Lyra stood tall, her hands glowing again. She thrust them forward, and a shimmering shield of light spread in front of them. The beams hit the shield, scattering into sparks. The hunters shouted, their formation breaking. David saw his chance. "Now!" he yelled. He rushed forward, his plasma knife cutting through the snow. The hunters didn't expect a human to charge. He slammed into the first one, slicing across the armor. Sparks flew, and the hunter fell with a heavy thud. Behind him, Lyra and Nira unleashed their power. Light crackled in the air, bending and twisting. Nira raised both hands, sending a wave of force that knocked 3 hunters off their feet. Lyra followed with a blast of fire-like energy, burning through another's armor. The battlefield turned into chaos. Explosions lit the snow, shadows danced, and the sound of metal and screams led the air. David fought like a man possessed. His knife flashed again and again, cutting, stabbing, dodging. He moved faster, he thought possible, driven by the need to protect the sisters at all costs. But there were too many. A blast hit the ground near David, throwing him back into the snow. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw a massive figure approaching. A commander. This one was larger than the rest, his armor black and gold, his weapon a heavy spear glowing with deadly energy. The commander's voice thundered. The traitor princesses will die tonight, and their human pet with them. David forced himself to his feet, spitting blood. He raised his knife. Come and try. The commander charged. His spear cut through the air, striking with deadly speed. David dodged, the blade missing his chest by inches. He slashed back, but the armor was too strong. Sparks flew, but no damage. The commander struck again, and David barely rolled away. The ground cracked where the spear landed. One hit would kill him. David, Lyra shouted. She raised her hand, sending a blast of light toward the commander, but he swung his spear, cutting through the energy like paper. Nira cried out in fear. He's too strong! David's muscles screamed, his lungs burned, but he refused to fall. The commander lifted his spear for a final strike. David raised his knife in desperation, but he knew it wasn't enough. Then it happened. The sisters stood together, their hands glowing brighter than ever before. Light wrapped around them, their voices rising in unison. The air trembled, the snow lifted into the sky, and a surge of power burst outward. A wave of pure energy struck the commander, throwing him back across the snow. His armor cracked, glowing lines spreading like fire. He roared in rage, but his strength was broken. David stared in shock. What was that? Lyra and Nira stood weak but firm, their bodies shining like stars. Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. Our bond, Tog. Ether, we are stronger. The remaining hunters froze, fear spreading through their ranks. They had never seen power like this. Some began to retreat, others stood frozen in shock. David seized the moment. He pointed his knife at them and shouted, Run, or you'll end up like your commander. The hunters broke. Some fled into the snow, others dragged the wounded away. The battlefield fell silent again, leaving only the fallen and the glowing sisters standing in the center. David dropped to his knees, exhausted. His chest heaved, his body bruised and burned. But he was alive. They were alive. Lyra and Nira knelt beside him, their hands touching his shoulders. Their silver eyes glowed softly, filled with gratitude and something deeper. Nira whispered, You fought for us. Lyra added, her voice strong, And we fought for you. David looked at them, a tired smile crossing his face. Looks like we make a good team. The sisters shared a glance, then smiled gently. Their glow dimmed as they leaned closer. In that moment, David understood. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were his, and the battle was only the beginning. The battlefield was silent now. Smoke curled into the green sky. The hunters had fled, leaving their dead behind. Snow covered the broken armor, slowly hiding the proof of what happened. David sat on the ground, his body aching from every wound. His broken knife lay beside him, and his hands trembled from exhaustion. Lyra and Nira knelt close, wrapping their glowing hands around his arms. Their touch was warm, soothing, almost pulling the pain away. You cannot fight forever, Nira whispered, her silver eyes filled with worry. David gave a weak laugh. Didn't think I'd even survive today. Guess I'm stubborn. But when he looked at the sisters, he saw something in their faces. Fear. Not fear of the hunters, but fear of what would come next. Tets. Inside the pod, as night fell, the truth finally came. The sisters sat across from him, their eyes serious, their voices calm. Lyra spoke first. David, there is more you must know about us. David leaned forward, tired but alert. I figured as much. You're not ordinary exiles. Nira lowered her head. No, we are not. Lyra's voice was steady. We are daughters of the High Throne, princesses of the Altherian Empire. The words hung in the air like ice. David blinked. Princesses? Royalty? Lyra nodded slowly. Yes. Our blood is the blood of rulers. Our people once called us heirs to power. But power creates enemies. David's jaw tightened. So your own people abandoned you because of politics. Nira's soft voice trembled. Because of jealousy, betrayal. Our uncle sits on the throne now. He feared us. He wanted us erased. Lyra's eyes hardened. So he sent hunters to cast us into the storm, to let the cold kill us. David felt anger burning inside him. Cowards. They couldn't even face you in open fight. The sisters stared at him. No one had ever spoken about their family with such raw honesty. For a long moment, silence filled the pod. Only the hum of the heater broke it. Finally, Lyra leaned closer, her eyes glowing brighter. But destiny changed when you came. You heard us. You saved us. No one else in the galaxy would have done what you did. David shook his head. I'm just a man who couldn't ignore two people in trouble. But Lyra's hand touched his chest. No, you are more. To us, you are savior, protector, bonded. Nira whispered, and in our people's law, that means one thing. David looked between them, his brow furrowed. And what's that supposed to mean? Lyra's voice was soft but clear. You are our destined husband. David froze. The words hit him harder than any hunter's weapon. Husband? He said, almost laughing. Hold on, I think so. Key, I misheard you. Nira shook her head gently. You did not. In our tradition, when a life is saved from certain death, a bond is formed, a sacred bond, stronger than any vow. Lyra added, You did not save one of us. You saved both. That means both of us are yours. David stared at them, stunned. He felt the pods spinning around him. This is insane. I'm human. You're alien royalty. And marriage, both of you? But the sisters only looked at him with calm certainty. Lyra's hand held his tightly. David, we are not asking. We are offering. You saved our lives. Now we offer ours to you. Nira leaned against him, her voice soft as a whisper. You will never be alone again. You will be ours, and we will be yours. David's heart pounded. He had been alone for so long, drifting through endless space, fighting storms, fighting death. Now these two glowing, beautiful sisters were asking him to join their destiny. But he also knew what it meant. Hunters would come again, armies even. By standing with them, he would be declaring war against an empire. His life would never be the same. He stood slowly, moving to the window. Snow stretched across the horizon, glowing faintly under the alien sky. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, tired, scarred, broken. Behind him, the sisters waited silently, their glowing eyes fixed on him. David whispered to himself, Do I stay the lonely survivor? Or do I step into something greater? He turned back to them. Their faces were filled with hope, fear, and something more. Love. For the first time in years, David felt something stir in his chest. A warmth that wasn't from the heater, wasn't from survival. It was from them. He walked back to them and knelt down. His hands touched theirs, one on each side, their glow wrapped around his skin, soft and alive. He looked into their eyes and spoke quietly. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I can be what you think I am, but I swear this. His voice grew firm. I will not leave you. I will fight for you. If that means I'm yours, then so be it. The sisters gasped softly. Tears shimmered in their glowing eyes. They leaned forward, pressing their foreheads gently against his, one on each side. Together they whispered, Then you are ours, forever. In that moment, the bond was sealed. Not by law, not by politics, not even by tradition. It was sealed by choice. David had chosen them, and they had chosen him. Outside, the snow fell softly, covering the battlefield, but inside, the pod was no longer a place of exile. It was the beginning of a new future. A future written not by fear, but by the bond of a human and two alien princesses. The night was long, but peaceful. For the first time since he had crashed on this frozen world, David did not feel alone. Inside the small pod, warmth filled the air. Lyra and Nira slept close, their glowing hands resting lightly against his arms, as if they feared he might disappear while they dreamed. David lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His body ached from battle, his mind still heavy with the weight of what the sisters had told him. Princesses, exiles, betrayal, and now, a bond stronger than marriage. His life had been simple before. Survive, one day at a time. Now, everything had changed. At dawn, he stepped outside. The storm was gone, leaving the sky clear and wide. Twin suns rose over the horizon, painting the snow in shades of gold and green. It was beautiful, yet it felt like a warning. The battlefield still lay silent. Broken armor and burned weapons half buried in snow, reminders of the hunters who had come for the sisters. David knew more would follow. Armies, warships. If the Empire wanted them gone, they would not stop until the job was finished. He clenched his fists. If I stand with them, I stand against an empire. And yet, when he thought of leaving, his chest tightened. He remembered their voices, their trust, their promise. You will never be alone again. Behind him, the pod door opened. Lyra stepped out, her silver eyes glowing softly in the morning light. Her white hair shimmered, moving gently in the breeze. You left quietly, she said, her voice calm but firm. David gave a tired smile. Didn't want to wake you. Nira appeared beside her, quieter, her gaze soft but sharp. "You are thinking," she whispered. David sighed. "I'm thinking too much. About you, about your empire, about what happens next." Lyra walked closer. "And what did you decide?" David didn't answer at once. He looked back at the rising suns, his thoughts torn between survival and destiny. They returned inside. Around the heater, they sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Nira broke it. "You do not have to stay. If you leave us, we will not stop you." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with hidden pain. Lyra's tone was different, harder. "But if you walk away, we will die. You know this. The hunters will return. Alone, we cannot win." David looked at both of them, two sisters, fragile but strong, offering him something no one else ever had: belonging. He shook his head slowly. "I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever." The sisters leaned closer, their eyes wide. "Then you accept us?" Nira asked softly. David nodded. "Yes, I accept you, both of you. Whatever comes, we face it together." Lyra's lips curved into a rare smile, fierce and bright. "Then you are not just our protector. You are part of us, forever." David's chest tightened, but it was not fear this time. It was something new, a warmth he had forgotten long ago. That night, they planned. The sisters spoke of hidden allies, of ancient codes still loyal to the royal bloodline. David listened, asking questions, his mind turning like the gears of a machine. If they could survive long enough, if they could find these allies, then maybe, just maybe, they could fight back against the Empire. But it would mean leaving this frozen world. It would mean stepping into war. And David, once a lone survivor, would become something else entirely. Later, as the twin suns set, the sisters stood with him on the ridge. The sky turned dark, stars filling the heavens. Somewhere out there was the Empire that wanted them dead. Somewhere out there was destiny. Nira slipped her hand into David's. Her glow warmed his skin. "Are you afraid?" she asked. David gave a small laugh, terrified. Lyra took his other hand, her silver eyes locked on his. "Then why do you stay?" David looked at both of them, then at the endless stars above. His voice was steady, stronger than he expected. "Because for the first time in my life, I have something worth fighting for." The sisters smiled, their glow brighter than ever. Together, they leaned closer, their foreheads resting against his. The bond was complete, not by blood, not by law, but by choice. In that moment, David was no longer just a human survivor. He was protector, partner, and something greater. The storm had brought them together. The hunters had tested their strength. Now the universe itself was waiting for their decision, and David had made his. He would not walk alone. He would walk with them, into danger, into war, into whatever future awaited. As the stars burned above, the sisters whispered in unison, their voices soft but certain. "Together, we will change everything." And David believed them, because deep down, he knew this was only the beginning.